Welcome, everybody. We'll get started here in a few minutes, but before we get started, just please let us know where you're coming from. I know we have some people out there on probably YouTube, LinkedIn, StreamYard. So I know I see Veronique, sorry. Veronique's joined us from Texas, but who else do we have out there? Let us know in the chat where you're coming from, and we'll get started here in just a minute. We'll give it another minute or two for people to join. Hey, Eric, welcome from Montreal. We'll give ourselves one more minute before we get started. But before we get started on the actual deck, I'd love to know, just throw it in the chat, let me know. Are any of you using NA functions, the NA function in Excel? I'm sure you've all seen an NA error. Oh, crud. Hold on one. Okay, give me just one moment here. Can everybody hear me now? I realize I was having a technical issue. You can let me know in the chat if you're all hearing me. That'd be great. Eric says yes, he's using the NA function. I believe that is what he responded to. Anyone else using it? Okay, good. Everybody can hear me? Great. All right. So today we're going to talk about the NA function in Excel. And so surprisingly, you wouldn't think a function like that would have many use cases, but it definitely does. My favorite area to use it is with charts. So we'll show you that here in a minute. Good. Glad everybody's hearing me. I was having a little bit of a technical issue there for a minute. So first, I'm just going to give everybody a minute. You can go ahead and go to this code, and you can download the Excel file if you want to download the file for today. So I'll give everybody a minute to do that. While we're waiting for that, I'll tell a few Excel jokes. If you've attended my training before, you might have heard them, but that's all right. They never get old, right? Isn't that how it works? So first one is, does anyone know what the VLOOKUP said on her online dating profile? Any ideas what VLOOKUP said on her online dating profile? She said, seeking an approximate match. It's true. All right. Does anyone know why accountants are not like actually wrong one. Let me sorry, wrong joke there. Let me switch here. Does anyone know what happens when a bar chart works out? We'll do one more. No, I'm not your future ex, Eric. We're staying away from that. Just kidding. Does anyone know what happens when a bar chart works out? It becomes stacked. You get a stacked bar chart. And then my favorite that always gets me in trouble, for all you accountants out there and FP&A people, what's the difference between an accountant and an FP&A professional? I'll tell you. When an accountant gets creative, they go to jail. When an FP&A professional gets creative, they get promoted. That's why I focus on FP&A. All right. Enough with the jokes. Hopefully everybody was able to download the file. If not, you can find it on my website. Just go to the FP&A guy under resources, click on Excel files, and it will be the first one there for today's training. So real quick, I'm going to just run through our agenda. I'm going to briefly introduce myself, tell a little bit about me for anyone who doesn't know me. I think everybody on the call does. They'll be real brief. Then we're going to talk about what is the NA function. And then today, there are several uses for it in Excel, but we're going to focus on how to use the NA function to improve your graphs. That's really where I use it. I know there are other use cases, people much smarter than me that probably have a lot of them, but I'm going to take you through several that I like to do with graphs, where they allow you to do things you couldn't do without it. So here's a little bit about me. The FP&A guy. I have 3 podcasts, only 2 listed here. I have Financial Modeler's Corner, all about financial modeling. That comes out weekly now. I have FP&A Tomorrow, all about FP&A. And then I also have one called Future Finance with Glenn Hopper. It's all about AI and technology, where it's going. We're bringing in thought leaders. We're sharing our own thoughts on that. We even have a great section where we say, you know, your job is safe when, and we talk about how AI goes completely off the rails from time to time. Are you saying the page is not working for you, Justin? Is anyone else having that problem? It should open an Excel file. So if you're having that same problem, let me know and I can see if I can fix it real quick. So if anyone else is not able to download the file, please let me know. But a little bit more about me. An FP&A content creator, influencer, whatever term you want to use, trainer. Did training earlier today. I get to go to Toronto next week. Get to work with Walmart and several other companies, Highliner Foods. I'm a podcast host, as I mentioned. I spent most of my career in FP&A. So people are having problems downloading the file. All right. So what I'm going to do for a minute, Eric, I need you to put some jokes in the comments for us so everybody can laugh. Well, I fix this file real quick. So give me 3 minutes if you don't mind, and I'll fix what's going on. So if anyone wants to share some jokes in the comments, please do that, and we'll get this fixed. I apologize. I thought it had got downloaded. I don't know what happened. So bear with me for 1 moment here, and I'll fix it real quick. All right. Well, I'm doing that. Let's see if I can come up with another joke. Does anyone know what you need to do if you want to keep gold diggers and Excel references, if you want them to stay around, you don't want them to move? Do you know what you have to do? You have to throw money at them. Anyone who understands Excel references will get that one. All right. Edit it. Let's see. I'm re-uploading the file now. Yeah, it looks like, I don't know why. That's weird. I uploaded it. Let's see. All right, there it is. Okay. I had forgot to click something. It should now be there. So if you guys can try and let me know if it's working for you now. We'll give it a minute. Yes, Kamal, F4, exactly. That's how you keep them both in place. Throw some money at them. Let's see what else can I come up with. Does anyone know what Kim Kardashian's favorite spreadsheet is? The hashtag Excelfie. I didn't write these jokes, I'll have you know. All right. So if somebody, Justin, Vernique, if one of you could let me know if you're able to download that, I'm going to go ahead and open the file. The first part I'm explaining a little bit, so hopefully everybody will be able to get it downloaded before I get into the parts where I'll want you to follow along. So it should be working now. If it's not, like I said, please let me know. I don't know, Eric. Why did it get in trouble? Okay, perfect. You got it, Vernique? All right. Is everybody should now be seeing my Excel screen. And we'll do one more. So Eric, let us know why the cell got in trouble. The other one is, does anyone know what the most dangerous cell in Excel is? C4. All right. Because it couldn't keep its sheet together. That's about how I feel right now. So perfect. All right. So the NA function is one of the most simple, and I would argue underutilized functions in all of Excel. All the function is NA, open parentheses, close parentheses. There may be another, but it's the only Excel function I know of that has no argument. Almost every single function, you're putting in text, you're referencing a cell, you have multiple arguments. Here, it's as simple as this. All you're going to do is type equals NA, open parentheses, close parentheses, and it's going to return the hashtag NA error. You're probably thinking, why would I want to return an error? Right? As a general rule, you wouldn't. But that error gets skipped in calculations in certain situations. It also gets skipped with graphs, which can make it incredibly useful. Thank you, Eric. Today and now, the time ones as well. So there's 3 that have no argument. Eric reminded me of, we'll share them here real quick. Today has no argument. It just gives you today. The function now, which gives you the day and time, has no argument. So there's 3 of them. I'm sure there's probably another one I'm not thinking of. Yep, Eric just threw in the now. So there's a few of them, right? But it's one of the very few that has no argument. It's the only one I know of that has no argument and returns an error that generally you get when you do something wrong in Excel. So first, I'll show you an example of where you could potentially use it with a formula. Then we're going to jump into graphs, because where I use NA is pretty much graphs. But let's say I had some numbers. I had the number 5, 5, and 0. And right here, if I do average of these 3, right, I get 3.33. Maybe 0, I really don't want that average. If I delete it, I do get 5. But what if there's an NA there? So what I want to show is if you had a reason you wanted to put an NA to identify all of them that maybe they didn't return a number, maybe it was the lookup, you stuck an NA at the end. For whatever reason, you wanted to see when there is a number and when there's an NA, the average doesn't work. There is a way you can have an NA in there. If you ever had a reason for an NA, you can use the formula called aggregate. And what that allows you to do is aggregate allows you to do a bunch of different math operations. So the first one is an average. You could say average here. You could say ignore errors. And then you can highlight all 3 of these. And even though there's errors in there, so maybe you have some errors in formulas, but you still want the averages. For whatever reason, you still want to calculate something. I could calculate it even though the error message is there. So you have to be able to use some kind of formula or function that allows you to ignore the errors. The typical average doesn't, but aggregate does. So there are cases with the aggregate function. Maybe you want to sum something, count something that has NAs. You can use that aggregate function. And your second argument, there is one, number 6 here. There's 7 of them. You could even do it with number 10. Ignore error values, nested subtotals, and other aggregate functions. Here, I just ignored errors. So you have a number of different options, one of which allows you to ignore errors and return the math, even though there's one in there. So probably not all that helpful. Not very often we're dealing with NAs where we need to get the math. So let's walk through some graph examples. I'm going to show 4 examples. Then we'll work through a couple of those examples with the Excel file. And for anyone who wasn't able to get the Excel file, if you joined late, you can get that on my website, thefpnaguy.com. Go to resources, Excel files. So almost all these tricks, pretty much all these tricks I learned from somebody else. I'm not smart enough to come up with my own ideas. I learn from others is what you'll find. Pretty much how I do everything. So what you're going to notice here is notice this graph is showing the min and the max in a different color, and then it shows all the other months. You'll notice I have an NA here, and when I walk through how to do this, I'll explain it. But what you're going to notice here is there are 3 series, but you looks like you only see 1 series, and that's because of the NA. The NA is hiding everything but these 2 series. If you put zeros there, it shows up. And that particularly is a big problem with line charts. So NA does not show up on a graph. So if you ever have a situation where you want to have a graph show something in certain times and not in others, you can use the NA function in different ways. So what I mean by that is, let's say I make July our biggest month for sales. So if you go with me, type in, say, 45,000 right here. Notice that got highlighted in green. This now looks like a regular series because that 37 now has an NA. Well, what happens if I make them the same? So I have 2. Well, those 2 now become green. And you can see the function here changes. And so I've dynamically created a chart here that allows me to see the max and min using the NA function along with all the others. So I can highlight it differently. What else is a benefit here as well is I have this in a table for a reason. And when we create it, you'll see that as well. But if I add period 13 here, so if I add, you know what? It's not doing what it's supposed to. I'm wondering if it has the data selected correctly. Hold on 1 second. Oh, I know why. Sorry. Let me just go back. I have months. I thought I had the period highlighted. So as soon as I add a month here, if I had 1/1/2024, notice it automatically added it to the chart. That doesn't have anything to do with NA. That has to do with the fact I used a table to create this. The chart will automatically adjust based on the table. So that's the first example where using NA helps me create this chart. The second, and this is one I saw Chris Riley use that I like, is notice right now these series names should be actual and forecast. I think I made some changes. But what you're going to notice is this right here is the actuals. In fact, we'll change the series name. So if I come in here, this series is going to be actuals. And this series will be our forecast. And so what you can see is it's all in one line. And we have different shading for each of it. It's actually 2 lines, but we're using NA to suppress the forecast for the first half of the year and to suppress the actuals that haven't happened for the last half of the year. Now watch what happens here. So before we walk through creating these, let's say I put 0 here. You now have a problem, right? That's not what you want it to look like. If I put 0 here, not a very helpful graph. So NA allows you to show nothing for those periods because it doesn't calculate it. The graph ignores it. So that is the second example of where using NA helps us create basically what appears to be one graph for our actuals and forecast. The third example is a dynamic chart. This one I learned from Shandu. I took one of his Excel courses. And so notice here I have 4 different charts. I have cells. So it says compare cells with COGS, gross profit, and customers. And so what I can do here, I'm going to enlarge this just a little bit. If I click COGS, that graph goes away. If I click gross profit, that graph goes away. If I click customers, the graph goes away. So now I'm just looking at cells. Now I could add back customers. In this case, you'll see customers looks very similar to cells. It's not so much about the numbers. It's more the idea that we're focusing on here. I could add gross profit. I can add COGS. I can turn off gross profit. So I can play with any of those. Again, I'm using NA with a checkbox to create this. And so I'll walk through how you can do it. I'm glad you like it, Vernique. I like to hear that's cool. Good. So that's the third example. The fourth one here is one of my favorite charts. This one I learned from Leela Garani. I also learned, I believe, the first one from her. So this here, you'll notice I have 2023 cells from highest to lowest, simple bar chart, nothing fancy. Down at the bottom, notice I have all the positives above the line, all the negatives below the line. So using NA has allowed me to alternate them. So what it allows me to do is to create what I call a variance chart. So instead of showing the years next to each other, I've now made it easy. I'm just going to adjust this a little bit to see, oh, Toyota is up 3%. Hyundai and Kia are up about, 16, 17%. Chevrolet is way down. And so I'm a big fan of this graph here, which is really two graphs. So we're using NA, we're using two different graphs to create a really easy way to see not only our absolute numbers for a year, but our year over year variance. So it could be done for budget, could be done for actuals, a number of different places. So those are the four examples for me that I use NA with graphs. Now we'll walk through how we set these up. But I'll stop for a minute and just see, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat if you do. If there's any questions about what we're going to talk about, what we've talked about so far, feel free to ask them. And in the meantime, I'm going to keep going. I'll keep an eye on the comments, see if any come through. We're going to do the first one. So if you can go to the page called Max and Min, what you're going to notice here is I have the month and the gross sales. So the first thing I'm going to do, and follow along with me, is we're going to turn this into a table. That way, when we put it into a chart, it's dynamic. So I'm going to hit Control T, create a table, and I'm going to go ahead and name it. We'll just call it cells underscore data. Probably an easy name. Now we need to create, if you go back and look here, we're going to need to create the max and min. I also am going to have us put a period in, because here we're going to use periods instead of the month this time. And I think my daughter's coming down, so you may hear a child in the background. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add max cells. Give me 1 second. Sorry, everyone. Sorry about that. My daughter was asking me if I knew the username for her friend for video games. I'm like, I have no idea. So, all right. So we have max cells. We have min cells. So we have those columns. In this case, I'm not going to be filtering anything, so it's easier to see. I'm going to turn off this filter button here so you guys can see the headers on each of these. And I'm going to add over here to the right, I'm going to add a column. So I'm going to insert column to the left. We'll call this period. And it's just going to be 1, 2. I got to change my dates here, but we'll copy it down. And anyone who knows their dates, the reason 1 is 1/1/1900 is when Excel started its dates. So the number 1 equals that. All right. So I have some periods here. I have month, I have gross cells, I have max cells, I have min cells. So where we use the if here is we want this to be dynamic. So no matter how many rows we have in this table, it will always display the max, or if there's 2 maxes, it will display both of them. And otherwise, it will display NA. So what we're going to do here is we're going to write an if statement. So if the max of this entire range, so of gross cells, of this object equals this cell right here, if it equals the row gross cells, then we return gross cells. And so that's our true statement. We need to put a parentheses here. So max gross cells, if it's equal to this row's gross cells, so equal to E4, then return E4 or E5, E5, etc. Otherwise, give me NA. That's going to allow me to create my second series. right? You can see that. One other thing I'm going to do, just in the interest of time, I'm going to copy the formatting here because I like to show it in thousands. I could go down to custom and create that, but we're going to go ahead and copy that. So you see it there. Now we're going to come over to min cells. I'm going to copy this formula instead of retyping it, enter it here, and I'm going to change it to just be min. So it's the exact same formula, except for this time it's going to give me the min. All right. So I've now created a table that I can use to create that graph. And so what I want you to do, if you're following along here, and if you need me to go slower, please just tell me. I'm happy to slow down a little bit. I'm going to highlight period, gross cells, max cells, and min cells. So I'm going to skip month for right now because both these are labels. I could use either. So we're going to go to insert. I'm just going to go to recommended charts. It gives me this clustered column. That's fine for now. I'll click OK. I'm not sure what just happened. It looks like it inserted a pivot table. I must have hit the wrong thing. So let's do that again. Clustered column. Why is it? I've never had it do that before. That's weird. All right, fine. I'll just go to insert instead of recommended chart. I'll go to all charts. I'm going to select that one there. And there we go. I'm going to fix it anyway. It won't matter at the moment. So we have our chart here. First thing I'm going to do is come down to change chart type. And so whatever chart types you have, you want to make sure all three are your column. So you want all three to be clustered column. But that still doesn't give us what you want. And so I'm going to go ahead, get rid of our legend. We don't need it. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these lines. And I'm going to get rid of this. My view when it comes to graphs, unless it adds something to your story, there's a specific reason to include it, always take it out. I believe keep it as simple as possible and ruthlessly reduce clutter. Because at the end of the day, every single thing you add to a graph increases cognitive load. So that's the general rule I follow. We'll go through and finish creating this one here. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of the outline. Those are the simple parts. For now, we'll take out the chart title just to make it easy. So now all we need to do is we need to get it to look like this. So we're most of the way there. We've set up the NA. So now all we need to do is click on the bars, hit Control-1. And what we have is, notice here, we have series overlap, we have gap width. And I'm going to bring that over a little bit. So click on that again. First thing you're going to do is you're going to overlap your series by 100%. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to change your gap width to 70%. So now we can highlight these ones right here, our main ones, and we can change the color. So I tend to like a gray color for my main one. So we'll go down to color and we'll select this one right here. Then what we're going to do is our tallest one here, we're going to select red. And what that is that tallest one is this series right here. You'll notice that. And then here under 1, we have our minimum series. And so I think let me do something here. All right. Let's see. So I want to make sure I have the minimum series highlighted right here. Min cells. We're going to change the color for that one. Just say green. And we want a solid line. All right. Why is it not? I think, let me look at this. chart type. Okay, oh, this right here, you'll notice this should be a clustered column. And this one right here should not be a chart type. So now you could see there's the one we want. We'll go ahead and change that one. Actually, let's make it red. And we'll make this one green. So what I had accidentally did there is somehow I ended up with 4 series. If you look at my data, this one right here should not be a series. And so that's what had gone wrong there is I hadn't realized I had that selected as a series. And so it was messing up the data. So now we have only 3 series. You can see lowest and highest right there. So now all I need to do is come back here, reset my series overlap to 100. I'll generally do my gap width about 70. And now we've created that chart outside of the data labels. We'll throw on some data labels and we have that chart. Now, anytime I add a month, I'll just make this one 1500. So it's the smallest. It's going to add it automatically and it's going to readjust your largest and your smallest. And even if you have multiple with the same, it will show multiple. So that is how you can build using NA a max and min chart. I really like this chart if I need to emphasize the maximum minimum. If that's really important to something, it's great because it immediately draws your eyes to the highest and lowest. You could even do just max, right? If I didn't want min, if I just delete this here, your min's going to go away. If I bring it back, there it is. All right. So that's the first one. The second one is the actuals forecast walkthrough. This one's a little more tricky, but what you're going to see here is there's a total of 7 elements that we've done. So here, normally we'd have these 3. The first thing we want is an if statement that looks at the actuals and returns the word actuals if it has actuals. Otherwise, it's going to return the word forecast. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that here. Right here. I'm going to insert an extra row just to give me some space. We're going to make this a little larger so everybody can see it. And I didn't want it quite that big. We'll copy this down, right? So now I can see first 6 months is actuals, next 6 months is forecast. Now, if I go back, the next thing I have is I have the actuals and forecast. So we'll copy those. We'll bring them over and then we'll walk through what those 2 columns are doing. So if you come back here, this one right here is strictly looking and saying, hey, if B4, if actuals equals F3, then give me D4, otherwise give me NA. So it's basically looking at the actuals and saying, if there is an actuals, give it to me, otherwise give me NA, right? So if I change this to 470, notice the graph updated there. Don't like the way that number showed up, but you can see how it updated. So I can undo that. If I delete 470 out, you can see it now goes to the forecast. It goes back to 300. So that first formula is just going to be a simple if where we're saying, hey, if this equals actuals and the label equals actuals and there's a number in this column, give me that number. There's other ways you could write that formula. But that's the one we're going to use because that's how it's set up for the moment. So we have that done. So basically this is, we now have series 1. Instead of these numbers, we have our first series with the NA. Now we need series 2 for our forecast. So this one is a little trickier. I'm going to copy the formula over and then I'll walk you through it. So the only real difference here, the first part's the exact same, except for it's looking at forecast. So, right, if forecast, so if B4 equals G3, then give me the forecast. Where before, same idea, if the actuals over here equals this, then give me actuals. So that's the first part. The second part of this, if this max ifs is basically looking and saying, whatever the max month is that has a number in the actuals column, return that. Otherwise, give me NA. And I'll explain why we want that here in a minute. But if we drag this down, notice June in both cases is the same number. The reason we do that, you'll see it back here. Notice the 365 right here. If I take this forecast and I change it to NA here, so it's just, I'm going to hard code that in. If I change this to NA, so if I didn't have that second formula, you get a gap there. So you're making both the numbers the same, so the two lines come together. That's why you have that second if statement, this part right here. Otherwise, if you didn't have to do that, the formula would just be this, kind of same as the other one. You would just have this right here, but that's going to give us the gap. So what we've done is I've just put in a second if statement. Yes, we could use an ifs or other things, but put a second if statement in here to say, hey, if the max number here is equal to actual, so it's looking it up and saying, hey, this is my range, you see where it says the word actuals, then it's basically saying whichever one is that max one, return that, otherwise return NA. So I'm asking for the max month and telling it in that situation when it's true, give me F9. So I'm doing the max equal to C9, which is month 6. Then the if statement is, okay, saying if that's where they're equal, if it's C9 or C8 or wherever, return the actuals from column F9. And so that way, anytime I add a month here, it will automatically update accordingly. That's the basic setup for this. Then all we need to do is once we've set it up, it's just a matter of creating a line graph. So insert recommended, doesn't find any recommended. We'll come down to line, and it's not picking that up quite right. I know why. We're just going to do this and we'll add the other in. All right, I want a line chart. So there we go. You could see the lines. And because the data is separated, I'm just going to go in here now and I'll edit this one to put in these month labels. Now I have months. So that's basically the chart. Now all I have to do is clean it up. You know, I could have periods here instead of the months if I wanted. I can change the colors. You know, I can show the legend or not show it. I can make all those changes to enhance the visualization. But the basic idea is there. You're basically using NA to say, hey, whenever it is a forecast and we have actuals, put an NA in the forecast. Whenever we don't have actuals, put an NA in the actuals and show it for the forecast, except for the current month or the last month. Then put it in both columns. So that NA function keeps it from going down to 0, like I showed earlier. And now, instead of showing two different graphs, if your business wanted to see one, which you could call year-to-date forecast, right? 6 months of actuals plus 6 months of forecast, you could name this your 6+6 forecast if you wanted. So I'll pause for a minute and just, I'm going to tell one Excel joke and see if there's any questions. We've gone through the first two. We'll go through the next two here in a minute, but I'm going to tell one or two Excel jokes, give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions. Let me know where you're coming from. So the first one I'm going to ask here is, does anyone know how spreadsheets gain muscle? So the question is, how do spreadsheets gain muscle? Lots of repeats. REPTS. If anyone's used the repeat formula, they'll appreciate that. It's a great formula to create. You can create bar graphs using it. It's not an actual graph. It's a way you can create it in cell by using repeat and the stovepipe character, which I can't remember what Unicode that is, but there's a code for it. And so that's kind of a fun little trick you can do with the repeat formula. All right. So the next one is the dynamic chart. This one is a little more involved than the other two, but it's still not bad. If you do not have the developer ribbon, I would encourage you to right click and customize your ribbon and turn on the developer ribbon. So you can go in and add it to your tabs. All you need to do is right click, customize ribbon, come to developer, click on it, click OK, and it'll add the developer tab. We're going to use that. So you can see right here, I have my raw data, right? So let's go ahead. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to walk you through the logic here, and then we'll build it because I think it will be easier for you guys to see it. So notice here I have this raw data, but that is not what my data is linked to. If I come in here, not select chart, select data, my data is linked to this down here, right? The reason for that is what I've done is, and I'll basically show you, let's say I have true here, false here, true here. I've written these formulas to say, hey, if, so as an example, if this is true, then, so give me this, otherwise give me an A. And the reason I don't have to write any test here is J26 equals the word true. So the first test is saying, oh, you've told me it's true, so I'll return the first value. So notice all I need to do now is I need to hard code this one. So we'll use F4, copy that down. And what did I do wrong? Oh, that should not have been an absolute reference. Oops. We'll just fix that real quick. Should have been relative. We'll drag that one over, drag it down. And so now you see I have these values here that if I select false, I get an NA. If I select true, not truer, true, I get the number. And the formula is really simple. It's wherever you have your true false, whatever data you want it to display if it's true, and then once again, the NA function. So that's the first part. That would set up this table. Now we need to figure out how do we do these check boxes. So first I'll show you how to insert a checkbox. So we'll come in here, form controls. I have a checkbox. Now, you can see I can hit check there. What I want you to notice, if you right click on that checkbox and come to format control, there's an area where you can link a cell. So we're going to link a cell right below it for right now. I'm going to link it to J6, wherever you want. J6, K6, doesn't matter, or J7. Notice the link cell, if it's checked, is going to display the word true. If it's unchecked, it's going to display the word false. Right? So what I have here is I have 3 checkboxes that I've named. If you click on these, what you're going to notice is the first one is D26. D26 is our cogs. The second one is going to be E26. You can guess what the third one's going to be. That's right, it's going to be F26. So what we've done is we've now created checkboxes that are using true or false to either return the data or to return NA. If they return all NAs, that graph, that series in the graph goes away because NA is not going to display. It's not going to calculate. So now I can turn on and off whatever I want. And you could do that with any type of chart where you have multiple series. You can decide which series to turn on and off with a simple true false statement, with false being NA, true being the data you want to display for that series. So it's a fun use case of it. You know, some of you probably say, "Why could you use a pivot table?" You could, and that may make more sense for what you're doing. Well, I just do that in Power BI. Again, that may make the most sense. I'm just showing different cases where you can do it. There are times, for whatever reason, you may want it like this. You may want to create a dynamic chart in Excel. You can do it through the use of the NA function. So that's the third one. You get the idea. I could walk all the way through it, but I think in the interest of time, I know we started a few minutes late. I'm going to move on to the fourth one, walk you through what we've done there, and then I have a little offer for you here at the end that I want to share. So the variance chart, and I'd love to know in the chat. So fun fact, I'm going to read this. Eric, we're going to put this up on the screen here. Eric's giving us a fun fact. So he says the NA function is totally unnecessary. Anywhere you can type NA in a formula, you can instead type hashtag NA. Excel recognizes it the same way. In fact, if you select the NA in your formula and hit F9, it will evaluate to the same thing. Stays fine. NA is just for convenience. Great point. I don't know if I actually realized that, Eric. I know you can enter NA. I just had never thought of doing it. So fun little fact there from Eric Ohm. He is the true Excel expert. I just pretend to be one on TV, in case you guys were wondering. So thank you, Eric. That's a cool little trick. So what I want to ask here, does anyone have any ideas what kind of chart this is? We'll give you a minute to kind of think about it. And while you're thinking, if anyone has any ideas, please put it in the chat. I'm going to walk through again. What we've done here is we're doing a formula that says if the change, right, if the growth change year over year is greater than 0, give me the change. Otherwise, give me NA. And as Eric pointed out, I could do this if I wanted. See here, it works. I like NA, but because I'm used to it, but you could do it this way. I prefer, as I said, the formula, but as he liked to point out, it is unnecessary. All right, so this one here, all it's doing is it's less than 0, right? The first one is greater than 0. So what that does is that gives me two series. Series 1 is greater than 0. Series 2 is less than 0. So right here, this is a simple bar chart. You can see I've selected each of the brands as my label, and I have the years. Oh, Santiago says, I know what it is, but I'll be cheating if I say I took your morning course. He's in my FP&A course, and we go through this graph. So he went through it yesterday. Rahan is guessing a waterfall chart. It is not a waterfall chart. Good guess. This is actually, I'll show you. So if we come in here, it is a scatter plot. Doesn't look like a scatter plot. And like I said, I learned this trick from Leela Garani. So what you'll notice if I come in and select the data is, if you look at it here, I have just Y values. So here's the -0. I've selected Y values. And for the X, for the here, I have the other. So I have positive and negative. So if I was to do that, what we'll do is I'm going to highlight this right here. I'm going to insert, go to charts, go to all charts, come to scatter. And let's see, which one do I want? We'll go with this one right here so you can see all the dots there. Click OK. Sometimes the dots don't come in. What I've found, if that happens, it didn't get the series right. So I'm going to edit this. I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to say, I want just this series here. So we'll select OK. We'll add series 2, which I want to be these ones. And now we have the points. So then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. We'll go ahead and get rid of these labels. And if I bring that down, you can see that looks similar. Kind of, not really. We'll go ahead and get rid of the grid lines. And so now all we have is the dots. Those dots represent each of the points. Then what we do is we're going to come in here and select an error bar. Veronique, you were right. I saw your scatter plot in there. I don't know if you waited till I showed it. I know there's sometimes a delay. So we have the error bars. We're going to get rid of the horizontal error bars. Then we'll go ahead and add the error bars to this one as well. We'll get rid of the horizontal error bars. Still doesn't look much at all like that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the error bar, hit Control-1 to bring up our format error bars. We're going to change it to minus only, no cap, percentage, and we're going to say 100%. Right. Next, we're going to come back here, and we want this one to be green. I'm going to select the color of green, and I'm going to make my width here to be 12. Or maybe more than that. It's not looking like I want. We'll do 40. We'll go 60 points. Somewhere in there. You'll do it till it looks about right. Thickness. What's happening is Excel changed some of its default colors. And with that, the width is treated differently depending on whether you have the latest style for Excel. So when I set these up before, this was like 11. Now I'm showing 100 and it's still not quite looking as thick. So it can take a little bit of guessing depending on that. So now you can see not quite what I want. Some of those look totally wrong. So we're going to go back and we're going to fix that. So we got our percentage of 100. We're going to go back and just leave that at 12 for now, I think. And then what we need to do is we need to come over here. See, and we want to get rid of our why. All right, let me see. Usually it does not. Let's get rid of the marker. So we're going to go ahead and remove the marker. Marker options, we want none. That gets rid of, there we go. So once we get rid of the marker there, you can now see, so we have none under the marker. Why is it still showing up? Hold on. Sorry about that. Marker. We want marker options is none. No fill. And there you could see, you now see the green is right. Color slightly different, but you get the idea. Now we do the same for this one. Control-1. We're going to go minus, no cap. Percentage is going to be 100%. Then we'll come over here and we'll click on our marker. Well, first we'll just make this 120, I think is what we did. We'll change the color to a red. And once we get rid of the marker, we'll get that fixed. So we'll come in here, go to marker. Marker options, say none. Change it to no color. And wait. Okay, not mark. Or not. All right. What did I do wrong? No fill. Why is my marker not going away? They changed something in this in the newer Excel. Usually I don't run into it doing that. Let me hit undo. Why did it do that? So we'll come back and try this one more time. You can see I got the top one. So I've never had to do this before. There's something in that's changed in the new styles. So marker options, we want none. We want no fill, no line there. That should completely get rid of that. And now we should be able to make this one thicker. There we go. All right. You have to get rid of all three now. Before you could just, I thought you could just get rid of the marker, but maybe I'm mistaken, but we got it all. Why is it not liking that? Don't know why when I change it to red, it's doing that. So, that is, try this one more time. Let's change it to red. We'll make this, I'll just say 10 points. See, it's working there. There we go. Anyone dealt with that one? Something weird's going on there. I've taught this, I don't know, 50 times now, and I've never had that happen. As you can see, it was working down here, and you'll see it's the same minus, no cap, percentage, 20 points, and the markers are hidden. You don't even see them show up because they are hidden. But if I click on them there, I'll show you. You can see the marker is not showing up when I go to marker options. It's clicked to none, which is what I did. But for some weird reason, I'm getting a blob right there. And I am not sure why. So I'll have to look into that. But that's the basic idea behind the chart. I won't continue to belabor the point. I hope everybody gets the idea. I like the scatter plot. It's the way I've learned it, Santiago. I think it gives you more control. I've done it with you can do it with a bar like you asked, but I tend to find I get a little more control with the scatter plot. I can make them as thick or as wide, really easy. I can do that with a bar as well, but I've always just found I like it this way. It's the way I learned it. But yes, there are some things you can do with the bar, and I think some of it is how the axis shows, and there's some other things that's a little cleaner. So I am not sure why, like I said, we're getting a bug this time, but I think you got the basic idea there. So those are 4 use cases for using NA in graphs. So now I just want to go back to the deck here real quick, and we're going to wrap up. 2 things I want to just share. First, despite my issue there, I do like to think I know what I'm talking about in Excel most of the time. So I'm going to offer, there's a new course I launched. It's actually the same material that's used in the new online Wharton FP&A course for Excel. 3 modules, nearly 50 videos, about 5.5 hours of content. I cover 3 subjects: Excel tables, which I like to think of as the gateway to modern Excel; Power Query, where you can transform your manual processes; and dynamic arrays, which I would call Excel's game changer. Normally, the course is $60 for all 3. If you use the code Modern Excel, and there's the QR code, you can buy it right now for $30. And here's a comment. This first one, highly recommended, well explained, and nicely structured. That person took the Excel tables. And then the second one is a company I trained. Paul's approach is fantastic, and his ability to educate you on key principles and new formulas to help structure your data in the most efficient way is incredible. I would highly recommend any FP&A team to invest time and training on such an important skill that all FP&A professionals should have. That comes from Deepak. He's the current interim CFO at Highliner Foods. It's one of the companies I'll be working with next week. And so there's that. And then also, if you want to join Plan Buddies, there's a link. You can use the code the FP&A guy to get 25% off. That's an FP&A community. We'd love to have you. We have a lot of different events we do. We have about 80 members. I know we have several of them on the call today. I know Vernique's here and some others. Eric has no clue why I was getting that error. You make me feel better, Eric, because I have no clue either. I was baffled. But that's the second offer. And then as a wrap up, the the key here is the NA function, and you could just use the NA value if you want, as Eric pointed out. But NA is a great trick to build even better graphs. It's a great way to avoid the zero, have it in your formula, and be able to create some cool graphs. So I'm a big fan of that trick. I hope you enjoyed the training, and I appreciate all of you joining. I'll hang around for a minute, and if anyone has any questions, I'll answer those. I'm going to stop sharing, but feel free to throw it in the chat if you want. And I'll just be around for about 2-3 minutes, and then I'll let everybody go. So if anyone has a question, you're more than welcome to ask. Well, you're welcome, Vernique. I'm glad you found a trick for it. Like I said, I learned this from others. That's where I still most my best work. I just ordered a book on mastering the sequence function that has over 200 use cases for the function. So that's my latest thing I'm trying to learn. So I'll hang on for one more minute, see if there's any other questions. If they're not, I'll let everybody go. But would encourage you, if you're interested in continuing your Excel training, to take the Excel tables course. You can also find that on my website, that modern Excel course that has tables, dynamic arrays, and Power Query. I'm glad you liked it. Glad you found it helpful. So good tricks. Love this, really useful. Definitely learned lots of new tips and look forward to trying them out. Glad it helped. Catherine, Vernique asked about the sequence function. Yes, I bought a book that tells you how much of a nerd I am that has over 200 uses for the sequence function. If you don't know the sequence function, I'll show you real quick, kind of high level what it is, and you'll probably be like, well, where would I use that? And that's what I used to think. And I'm starting to learn more and more use cases for it. So, Vernique, I'll show you here real quick, and then we'll end the call. But the sequence function has 4 arguments. You give it a number of rows. I'm going to say I want 500 rows. I want 5 columns. Start with the number 1, increase by the number 1. And you see all it did is create a range of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 2,500. So I have 5 rows of 5. But if you know what you're doing with that formula, you can create ranges of dates that'll automatically update. You can create the alphabet. You can create all kinds of different sequences. You can use it with text formulas to count how many times a number or a word appears in a certain cell. All kinds of different things that you can do with the sequence function. I'm learning a ton of them right now. I just barely started the book. But there you go. On that note, I know we're a few minutes over. We're going to go ahead and wrap up, but thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out.